Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I always thought the interest in Bigfoot was folklore, hoaxes, and gullible people. But I've been listening to eyewitness accounts lately and reading recorded historical ones. I have to say, the apparent sincerity and the volume of eyewitness evidence is compelling. It reminds me of the situation with UFO sightings and abductions. Very interesting. What does /X/ think of this one?
Agreed, OP. I have always thought Bigfoot stories in particular are just people seeing other animals, like bears, getting scared, and concocting some story to justify or rationalize what even they suspect was an irrational fear. Have you ever read Albert Ostman's sworn testimony? It's a prospector's account from the early 1900s. Veers into the almost comically absurd. But if you're getting into this stuff, it's an interesting read. I can share it here if you'd like. For your information, this guy's sworn testimony meanders a lot, and the original is very long. I've cut it down to only the important details and narrative, but this is still going to be a long post. Albert Ostman's sworn testimony. I have always followed logging and construction work. I'd worked for over 1 year on a construction job and thought a good vacation was in order. British Columbia is famous for lost gold mines. One is supposed to be at the head of Toba Inlet. Why not look for this mine and have a vacation at the same time? I took the Union steamship boat to Lund, British Columbia. From there, I hired an old Indian to take me to the head of Toba Inlet. This old Indian was a very talkative old gentleman. He told me a story about a white man getting gold from a lost mine. This white man was a very heavy drinker, spent his money freely in saloons, but he had no trouble getting more money. He would be away a few days, then come back with a bag of gold. But one time he went to his mine and never came back. Some people said a Sasquatch had killed him. At that time I had never heard of Sasquatch, so I asked what kind of an animal he called a Sasquatch. The Indian said, "They have hair all over their bodies, but they are not animals. They are people. Big people living in the mountains." My uncle saw the tracks of one that were 2 feet long. Another saw one over 8 feet tall. I told the Indian I didn't believe in their old fables about mountain giants. It might have been some thousands of years ago, but not nowadays. The Indian said, "There may not be many, but they still exist." My equipment consisted of one .30-30 Winchester rifle. I had a special homemade prospecting pick, axe on one end, and pick on the other. I had a leather case for this pick which fastened to my belt. Also, my sheath knife. A storekeeper on the way up sold me some matches, and my grub consisted mostly of canned stuff, except for a side of bacon, a bag of beans, prunes, macaroni, 6 packets of Rye King hardtack, 3 rolls of snuff, and milk. I had 2 boxes of shells for my rifle. We arrived at the head of the inlet at 4 p.m. The Indian had supper with me, and I told him to look out for me in about 3 weeks. I would return to the same spot when I came back. He promised to tell his friend to look out for me too. At this point, Ostman hiked about, prospecting until he found an ideal campsite. He traveled great distances in the interim. I'm only including a few excerpts from his hike. About 2 p.m. I came to a flat place below a rock bluff. There was a bunch of willows in one place. I made a wooden spade and started digging for water. About a foot down, I got seepings of water, so I decided to camp here for the night. Later, I found a small spring and made a small trough from cedar bark and got a small amount of water. I had my lunch and rested here till evening. I saved all the water I got from this spring, and I made it over the pass late that night. I was hungry and tired, so I camped at the first bunch of trees I came to. I had about a gallon of water, so I was good for one day, but I could see a rough country ahead of me. I had good going and a slight downhill all day. I must have made 10 miles when I came to a small spring and a big black hemlock tree. This was a lovely campsite. I spent 2 days here just resting and prospecting. The first night here I shot a small deer, buck, so I had plenty of good meat and good water. Then I came to a canyon, and on the other side was a yellow patch of grass that meant water. I was tired, and when I finally got there I dug a pit for water and got plenty for my needs. The next day I had a hard time going, but I found an exceptionally good campsite. It was 2 good-sized cypress trees, growing close together and near a rock wall, good shelter for rain, with a nice spring just below these trees. I intended to make this my permanent camp. I cut lots of brush for my bed and rigged up a pole from this rock wall to hang my pack sack on, and I arranged some flat rocks from my fireplace for cooking. I shot a grouse just before I came to this place. Too late to roast that tonight. I would do that tomorrow. And that's when things began to happen. I am a heavy sleeper. Not much disturbs me after I go to sleep, especially on a good bed like I had now. The next morning I noticed things had been disturbed during the night, but nothing was missing that I could see. I roasted my grouse on a stick for my breakfast, about 9 a.m. I started out prospecting. I always carried my rifle with me. That night I laid my rifle under the edge of my sleeping bag. I thought a porcupine had visited me the night before, and porkies like leather, so I put my shoes in the bottom of my sleeping bag. The next morning my pack sack had been emptied out. Someone had turned the sack upside down, but it was still hanging on the pole from the shoulder straps as I had hung it up. Then I noticed 1/2 pound package of prunes was missing, but my salt bag was not touched. Porkies always look for salt, so I decided it must be something else than porkies. I looked for tracks but found none. I did not think it was a bear. They always tear up and make a mess of things. I kept close to camp those days in case this visitor would come back. I intended to make a new campsite the following day, but I hated to leave this place. I had good spring water, and that is hard to find. That night I took special notice of how everything was arranged. I closed my pack sack. I did not undress, only took off my shoes and put them in the bottom of my sleeping bag. I drove my prospecting pick into one of the cypress trees so I could reach it from my bed. I also put the rifle alongside me, inside my sleeping bag. I fully intended to stay awake all night to find out who my visitor was, but I must have fallen asleep. I was awakened by something picking me up. I was half asleep, and at first I did not remember where I was. As I began to get my wits together, I remembered I was on this prospecting trip and in my sleeping bag. It felt like I was tossed on horseback, but I could feel whoever it was walking. I tried to reason out what kind of animal this could be. I tried to get at my sheath knife and cut my way out, but I was in an almost sitting position and the knife was under me. The rifle was in front of me. I had a good hold of that and had no intention to let go of it. After what seemed like an hour, I could feel we were going up a steep hill. I could feel myself rise for every step. Whatever was carrying me was breathing hard and sometimes gave a slight cough. It was very hot inside. It was lucky for me this fellow's hand was not big enough to close up the whole bag when he picked me up. There was a small opening at the top, otherwise I would have choked to death. Then he seemed to get on level ground and was going at a trot for a long time. By this time I had cramps in my legs. The pain was terrible. I was wishing he would get to his destination soon. I could not stand this type of transportation much longer. As near as I could guess, we were about 3 hours traveling. I had no idea when he started, as I was asleep when he picked me up. Finally, he stopped and let me down. I heard chatter, some kind of talk I did not understand. The ground was sloping, so when he let go of my sleeping bag, I rolled over. I got my head out and got some air. I tried to straighten my legs and crawl out, but my legs were numb. I tried to massage my legs to get some life in them and get my shoes on. I could hear now it was at least 4 of them. They were standing around me and continuously chattering. I had never heard of Sasquatch before the Indian told me about them, but I knew I was right among them. I now had circulation in my legs. I tried to stand up. I was wobbly on my feet but had a good hold of my rifle. I asked, "What do you fellows warn with me?" Only some more chatter. It was getting lighter now, and I could see them quite clearly. I could make out forms of 4 people, 2 big ones and 2 little ones. They were all covered with hair and no clothes on at all. They looked like a family, old man, old lady, and 2 young ones, a boy and a girl. The boy and the girl seemed to be scared of me. The old lady did not seem too pleased about what the old man dragged home. They all left me then. I had my compass and my prospecting glass on strings around my neck. I tried to reason our location and where I was. I could see now that I was in a small valley about 8 or 10 acres, surrounded by high mountains. On the southeast side, there was an opening about 8 feet wide at the bottom and about 20 feet wide at the highest point. That must be the way I came in. But how will I get out? The old man was now sitting near this opening. I moved my belongings up close to the west wall and emptied out my pack sack. My full box of shells for my rifle were missing. I only had 6 shells beside what I had in the magazine of my rifle. The boy and the girl were always watching me from behind some juniper bush. I decided there must be some water around here. The ground was leaning towards the opening in the wall. There must be water at the upper end of this valley. There is green grass and moss along the bottom. I took my rifle and the can and went looking for water. On my way back, I noticed where these people were sleeping. On the east side wall of this valley was a shelf in the mountainside with overhanging rock. The floor was covered with lots of dry moss, and they had some kind of blankets woven of narrow strips of cedar bark, packed with dry moss. They looked very practical and warm. The first day not much happened. The young fellow was coming nearer me and seemed curious about me. My one snuff box was empty, so I rolled it towards him. When he saw it coming, he sprang up quick as a cat and grabbed it. He went over to his sister and showed her. They found out how to open and close it. They spent a long time playing with it. Then he trotted over to the old man and showed him. They had a long chatter. The next morning, I made up my mind to leave this place. I rolled up my sleeping bag, put that inside my pack sack, packed the few cans I had, swung the sack on my back, injected a shell in the barrel of my rifle, and started for the opening in the wall. The old man got up, held up his hands as though he would push me back. I pointed to the opening. I wanted to go out, but he stood there pushing towards me and said something that sounded like "Soka, Soka." I backed up to about 60 feet. A .30-30 might not have much effect on this fellow. It might make him mad. I only had 6 shells, so I decided to wait. I went back to my campsite to figure out some other way to get out. If I could make friends with the young fellow or the girl, they might help me. So I decided next time I give the young fellow my snuff box to leave a few grains of snuff in it. He might give the old man a taste of it. The young fellow went up the mountain to the east every day. He could climb better than a mountain goat. He picked some kind of grass with long, sweet roots. He gave me some one day. They tasted very sweet. I gave him another snuff box with about a teaspoon of snuff in it. He tasted it, then went to the old man. He licked it with his tongue. They had a long chat. Later, I made a dipper from a milk can. I threw one over to the young fellow that was playing near my camp. He picked it up and looked at it, then he went to the old man and showed it to him. They had another long chatter. Then he came to me, pointed at the dipper, then at his sister. I could see that he wanted one for her too. I had other peas and carrots, so I made one for his sister. When I had made the dipper, I dipped it in water and drank from it. He was very pleased and almost smiled at me. He went to his sister and gave her the dipper I made for her. They did not come near me again that day. If only I could get the old man to come over to me, get him to eat a full box of snuff. That would kill him for sure, and that way kill himself. I wouldn't be guilty of murder. The young fellow might have been between 11 to 18 years old, about 7 feet tall, and might weigh about 300 pounds. His chest would be about 50 to 55 inches. He had wide jaws, narrow forehead that slanted upward round at the back about 4 or 5 inches higher than the forehead. The hair on their heads was about 6 inches long. The hair on the rest of their body was short and thick. The woman's hair was a bit longer on her head, and the hair on her forehead had an upward turn like some women have. They call it bangs among women's hairdos. She was over 7 feet tall and had a goose-like walk. The man's eye teeth were longer than the rest of the teeth, but not long enough to be called tusks. His forearms were longer than common people have, but well proportioned. His fingernails were like chisels. I have no idea what size shoes they would need. I was watching the young fellow's foot one day when he was sitting down. The big toe was longer than the rest and very strong. In mountain climbing, all he needed was footing for his big toe. They were very agile. To sit down, they turned their knees out and came straight down. To rise, they came straight up without help of their hands and arms. I will soon have to make a break for freedom. The old man was very interested in my snuff, watching me when I take a pinch of snuff. One morning after I had my breakfast, both the old man and the boy came and sat down only 10 feet away from me. I had saved up all the dry branches I found, and I had some dry moss, and I used it to start a fire. I got my coffee pot boiling, and it was strong coffee too, and the aroma from boiling coffee was what brought them over. I was sitting eating hardtack with plenty of butter and sipping coffee, and it sure tasted good. I was smacking my lips, pretending it was better than it really was. I set the can down that was about half full. I intended to warm it up later. I pulled out a full box of snuff, took a big chew. Before I had time to close the box, the old man reached for it. He grabbed the box and emptied it in his mouth, swallowed it in one gulp. Then he licked the box inside with his tongue. After a few minutes, his eyes began to roll over in his head. He was looking straight up. I could see he was sick. Then he grabbed my coffee can that was quite cold by this time. He emptied that in his mouth, grounds and all. That did no good. He stuck his head between his legs and rolled forwards a few times away from me. Then he began to squeal like a stuck pig. I grabbed my rifle and said to myself, "This is it. If he comes for me, I will shoot him plumb between his eyes." But he started for the spring. He wanted water. I packed my sleeping bag in the pack sack with the few cans I had left. I started for the opening in the wall, and I just made it. The old lady was right behind me. I fired one shot at the rock over her head. She turned and ran inside the wall. I must have made 3 miles in some world record time. I knew I must have 2 mountain ridges between me and saltwater, and by climbing this ridge I would have a good view of this canyon, so I could see if the Sasquatch were coming after me. As I came over the ridge, I could see Mount Baker. Then I knew I was going in the right direction. I was hungry and tired. I decided to rest here for a while. I had a good view of the mountainside, and if the old man was coming, I had the advantage because I was above him, and he'd have to stop a few 30-30 bullets. I ate some hardtack and I opened my last can of corned beef. I did not dare to make a fire. I rested here for 2 hours. When I got near the bottom, I shot a big blue grouse. She was sitting on a windfall, looking right at me, only 100 feet away. I shot her neck right off. I made it down to the creek at the bottom of this canyon. I felt I was safe now. I made a fire between two big boulders, roasted the grouse, made some coffee, and opened my can of milk. My first good meal in days. I spread out my sleeping bag under a big spruce tree and went to sleep. Next morning when I woke up, I was feeling terrible. My feet were sore from dirty socks. My legs were sore. My stomach was upset from that grouse that I ate the night before. I was not sure I was going to make it up that mountain. My legs were shaking. I had to rest every 100 feet. It took me 6 hours to get to the top. After about 2 hours, I got downhill to the heavy timber and sat down to rest. I could hear a motor running hard at times, then stop. I made for this sound, and after a while, I hear someone holler, "Timber," and a tree go down. Now I knew I was safe. When I came up to the fellows, I guess I was a sorry sight. I came up out of the bushes and they kept staring at me. I asked where I was and how far to the nearest town. The men said, "You look like a wild man. Where did you come from?" I told them I was a prospector and was lost. I had not had much to eat the last few weeks. The bucker called to his partner, "Pete, come over here for a minute." Pete came over and looked at me and said, "This man is sick. We had better help him down to the landing, put him on a logging truck and send him down to the beach." I did not like to tell them I had been kidnapped by a Sasquatch, as if I had told them, they would probably have said, "He's crazy too." Pete helped me up into the truck cab and said, "The first aid man will fix you up at the camp." The first aid man brought me to the cook and he looked me over and asked, "When did you eat last and where did you come from?" I told him I'd been lost in the wood. I ate a grouse last night and it made me sick. After the cook had given me a first-class meal, I asked the first aid man, "Can you get me a clean suit of underwear and a pair of socks? I would like a bath too." He said, "Sure thing. You take a rest and I will fix all that." After a session in the bathroom, the first aid man gave me a shave and a hair trim, and I was back to my normal self. The bull of the woods told me I was welcome to stay for a day and rest up if I liked. I told him I accepted his hospitality as I was not feeling any too good yet. I told about my prospecting, but nothing about being kidnapped by a Sasquatch. The following day, I got the Union boat back to Vancouver. That was my last prospecting trip, and my only experience with what is known as Sasquatches. I know that in 1924 there were 4 Sasquatches living. It might be only 2 now. The old man and the old lady might be dead by this time. Notes. Everyone who has met with Albert Ostman is convinced by his sincerity. Why would the father Sasquatch kidnap Ostman? Chris Murphy makes the point that perhaps he was kidnapped in order to provide a mate for the young female Sasquatch. Ostman himself was only a young man at the time. It is also interesting to note that not once did Ostman speak of any foul odor, which is common with Bigfoot sightings.
Hairy Man. I recently received a telephone call from a woman who I will refer to as AY. When AY was growing up in the 1970s, she would spend a lot of her time with her aunts who lived in the northeast suburbs of Detroit. The neighborhood had many acres of woodland, as well as old, dilapidated properties that were covered in vegetation. The kids would talk about the hairy guy that spent a lot of time in one of the large abandoned buildings. AY was curious, so she accompanied some of the kids into the woods. Sure enough, as they stood near the house, they would occasionally see the hairy guy look out of a large broken window on the first floor. AY described the face as that of a caveman with a wide, flat nose. The hair was black and stringy. There had been talk in the area for many years of a huge, hairy creature that would be seen roaming the neighborhood at night, but nobody ever seemed to get a good look at this thing. In the winter of 2016, AY was living in her aunt's old house, which she moved into after her aunt passed. She was returning home from work when she noticed that several people were gathered around what appeared to be a multi-car accident at the end of the street. There was a lot of ice and snow on the road, so she figured that may have been the reason for the accident. But as she looked closer, the first thing she noticed was that one of the cars was literally upside down and teetering on the heavy branches of a large oak tree. Another car looked like it had been tossed into the adjacent bushes. She walked over to the scene and listened to one of the drivers, her neighbor, attempt to explain to the police officer that this big, hairy man walked out in front of me. I scared it and it got real mad. I jumped out the car and ran into the house. As she watched from the window of her house, the hairy creature picked up the small car and tossed it into the oak tree. Then it pushed a parked car into a yew bush and then flipped it on its side. The police seemed to think the woman was either impaired or crazy, but AY had thought back to the hairy guy in the woods. As she walked back to her house, she soon noticed a trail of huge footprints in the snow along the side leading to the woods and back. She took a few photos of the tracks, but she didn't say anything to anyone other than her nephew. AY is positive that was the same creature she saw when she was a girl. Her nephew has been setting trail cams for the past 3 years, but he has been unable to capture any photographic evidence. The abandoned houses in the woods had since been razed.
I've got a story that may be hard to believe, but I avow to you that it is completely true. I've lived on the same property in Smyth County, Virginia, all my 68 years, and I have seen a lot of strange things, though I believe all were natural. But there is one thing in my woods that I have never been able to explain. The first time I saw it, I was 16 or so and squirrel hunting in the late afternoon. I was sitting on a large rock watching a den hole in a large hickory tree when I noticed a hairy man running in the hollow below me. It was covered top to bottom with short, reddish-brown hair. The hair on its head and face was very long. I think it was around 6 feet tall. It made a hell of a racket moving through brush, crashing branches and grunting up a storm. It then turned around and did the same thing on its way back. I stood up and quickly made my way home. I never said anything to my folks about what I saw. That's the last I had seen of this thing until this past October. I was dragging old tree branches down into the woods when I stumbled on a tree root. I twisted my knee badly and couldn't stand on it. I lay on the ground in pain, trying to figure out what I was going to do. Then all of a sudden, I woke up on the porch bench. It's totally dark. I reach over and turn on the porch light. How did I get here? Then I noticed mud on my clothes and mud on the porch floor. There is also a pile of hand-sized creek pebbles on the porch table. I had seen these piles of pebbles throughout the woods for as long as I could remember. That's when I realized that the hairy man in the woods must have brought me home. I wondered if it was the same hairy man I saw when I was a boy. That's the only explanation I can come up with. I don't have any neighbors since I'm living on the ridge. Maybe I'll see it again one day.
Pop's experience. One of my clients and pretty good friends had a customer whose father-in-law was alleged to have been reduced to a neurotic child by a terrifying Sasquatch encounter. I went to speak to the son-in-law once, but the old man, Pop, was extremely hesitant to talk to me about it. I know who Pop is because he is very accomplished in a mechanical field that I'm very interested in. His overall reputation as a person is stellar. Pop loved to hunt. When he neared early retirement, he and his wife got some land in Texas so he could hunt often without all the disruption of traveling to different places. That satisfied wifey, and he hoped to retire in peace. Last November, he was in his very nice north-facing custom deer stand on his land, about 1,500 feet from the house, when he heard steps coming from the south. Once the steps got about 50 feet away, he barked out a trespassing warning to leave and never come back. He could not see behind him because the stand is mounted on a very large tree. The steps stopped. Then in 4 quick strides, the creature appeared just to the side of the tree, slightly forward of it, and spun around and looked right at him. Pop started screaming, and this upset the creature, which screamed too and approached the stand and jumped up. It was trying to reach him or grab the bottom of the stand and pull the whole thing down. For reference, the bottom of the stand was 15 feet off the ground. Once he got his wits a little assembled, Pop went on the defensive and leaned up to donate a .270 round to the animal. But he was shaking so bad that he dropped his gun over the rail, which threw him into a panic. The Sasquatch had already touched the bottom of the stand twice, and Pop felt like his life was in extreme danger. Survival mode kicked in hard, and he went for the only weapon he could think of: cans of iced tea. Right as he leaned down to open the cooler and snatch a can of tea, the Sasquatch backed up a few steps, as though it were trying to get a running start so it could jump higher and get him out of the tree. Pop sprang up and chucked a can of tea as hard as he could at the Sasquatch and nailed it square in the upper face, which made it double over and groan loudly, hands over face. It seemed surprised and disoriented. Then Pop poured the ice and water from the cooler on it, and that caused it to wig out in grand fashion. Just as he followed by throwing the cooler at it, he missed. The Sasquatch tore off to a nearby tree line by the creek and watched him through a crook in a tree, rocking side to side. Right then, Pop was hit with the realization that he had his Colt 1911 with him in his backpack. He dug the gun out of the bottom of the bag, aimed at the creature's head, and fired. Nothing happened. He didn't have one up the snout. So he then racked the slide, and right then the thing took off into the brush to the north. It crossed the creek and was shortly out of sight. Pop got off one shot and is certain he missed by a wide margin. He waited a short while and dismounted the stand to return home. He was white as a sheet and crying when he got there, and it was the first time in 32 years his wife had even seen him noticeably scared. Since then, he refuses to hunt. He won't go past the tree line around the house and will not even leave the patio after sunset. A couple of weeks ago, Pop's truck broke down on the thickly wooded private dirt road leading from the farm to Market Road to the house. He was stranded in the middle of a sunny afternoon about 700 feet from the house. Instead of walking home, he shut himself in the truck and kept calling people on his cell phone until he found someone to come and get him for the 20-second car ride to the house. His son-in-law received a hysterical voicemail message. Pop was practically sobbing, begging for him to come help, so the guy had to drive all the way from Nacogdoches to give a hardened combat veteran and lifelong adventurous hunter and outdoorsman a very short ride from the front yard to the front door. Pop had a .44 Magnum Colt Python on him at the time, which he always carries with him. There have been some other curious incidents, but nothing like terror in the tree stand. Hopefully I can gain access to the land. The family is urging him to at least talk to someone who knows about these animals. It's very close to my own home, and if I can gain an inroad, I'll be headed out there soon.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.